Thank you so much. Welcome to this panel on ecosystems relationships in health tech. I have to say this is the first time I'm wearing these, and I think the same goes for the rest of the panel almost, so it's a new experience. Anyway, I would like to welcome you to the panel, and on my right-hand side here I have Mikko Kauppinen from GE Health Innovation Village in Helsinki. Would you please say a few words about yourself and what you do in the Health Village in Helsinki?
Yeah, hi, thanks very much, and great to be here. So indeed, my official title is Village Chief. So I run a village. Every village has to have a chief. So we have what we call a Health Innovation Village, which is essentially comprised of about 40 startup companies, all operating in digital health area. We are housed together with GE Healthcare, that is one of the biggest medtech companies in the world. And our purpose is really to find partnerships between these startup companies, the very small companies, the very novel companies, and a giant sort of big iron company like GE. So that's what we try to do.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. And then we have Medical Director Ralf Ackermann from Bayer. Would you please introduce yourself and your role in the health tech ecosystem?
Yes, thank you so much, and how great to see so many people here. Yes, I come from Bayer, and I actually want to say Bayer is not a pharma company. Maybe some of you know Bayer. Does anybody know aspirin? Put up your hand. Yes, you see, you know it. But Bayer is actually a life science company. So that what you, in general, said we work with health and nutrition. So we have 3 divisions, which is the pharma division, the consumer health, and then the agriculture, the division. So with that aspect, I work on the pharma and work in the Scandinavian organization as such. Why I'm here today? Because we in Bayer are very interested in the innovation ecosystem. We're very active in that area. We have dedicated staff and people for this in our headquarters and also around in our affiliates. It's not my fixed role to do this, but we have an interest in it, and I go on a fishing expedition, from time to time at various events such as this one, looking out for new ideas for our various forums where you can apply. But I'll talk a bit about that later. Yeah?
Okay. So welcome you to also Sina Mikko from Radiobotics. Could you please say a little bit about being a startup in a health tech ecosystem?
Yes. So if Mikko is the largest in the world, I'm probably the smallest in the world. I am the COO and the co-founder of Radiobotics, and we try to build machine learning algorithms that can detect diseases in X-rays. And we've come pretty far. We're only 2 years old, and we are very happy to be part of the ecosystem, and we benefit greatly from all of these visionary people around here. So, and that's also what we're really trying to do, and to be relevant towards these areas and these players, because we don't have the muscles, we don't have the money, we don't have the people, so we really rely on these things. So it's great to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Stina. And last but not least, we have Lars Allerup from the capital region, covering, I think, did you mention 10 hospitals these days?
11.
11, and then you are leading the public corporate procurement area of the capital region.
Yes, and thank you for the invitation and for attending the discussion. So I've been working with corporate procurement in the capital region of Denmark since 2007, for the first 10 years heading up the category of medtech equipment, so practically buying all the stuff that Stina and Mikko and some of the companies producing, but also linking it to the region's investment strategy, so in terms of first of all, the next fiscal year's budget, but also the long-term investment plans for how to spend the region's money for these 11 hospitals. That I did the first 10 years, and then 2 years ago I started up a new department, still within corporate procurement, but only doing public-private innovation partnerships. So next year, for instance, we have a project coming online with Radiobotics, and we've got 7 large-scale projects running now, adding another 7 next year.
Wow, sounds great. Well, in my opinion, I think we have a great ecosystem in Denmark for health tech, and I really think we have built it out. And I think you guys here in the panel represent the variety of health tech also in the Nordic countries, how we work together. But that brings up a question to me, which is pretty broad, but that is, how do we meet each other? I mean, how do you meet Mikko? How do you meet Stina? Or how do you meet Lars? And now that you are in Helsinki, how do you guys meet each other? Like, where's the matchmaking?
Yeah, I think it's always a problem, and I think, we've had these startup conferences that, I think they became very fashionable at some point, and I think a lot of people went to them. But I think as people got more focused, also the startup ecosystem, I think, matured a bit. So now people are clearly looking for, in the health tech space, they're looking for more health tech specific events. And those would be, we don't have enough of that, to be honest. So I think we have a bit of a problem sort of like meeting the relevant people. But I think the connections, even if you meet a lot of people in events like this, I think still the best connections are always done sort of like more one-on-one basis, and it's all about sort of having a network who can introduce you to the right people and open doors, and that's kind of what we try to do, is open doors with the muscles of the GE and other medtech companies, utilize that sort of like for the benefits of the startup companies, so that they can have the one-on-one meetings then with the right people. In the end, that matters more than meeting 1,000 irrelevant people.
Okay. So any of you would like to give your opinion on that? Yeah?
Well, I mean, I also think that we're very good at inviting ourselves, and in my humble perspective, because we have to, because there is so many of us, and I also think that when you invite yourself and you actually have something interesting to present and you're solving a actual problem, I also think that makes it of course easier, and I think that we know that we need both you, Lars, and you, Mikko, and also you as well. We need the industry, we need all the players. And we are spending a lot of time understanding what their needs are and how we can support that as well as a startup. But we also has come to a point where we now also feel we can benefit from those things, and we actually get time to talk and we get invited to these places. So I also think that even though the startups, they always urging for this, they also have a responsibility to show these things and to knock on the doors, because that is what it is to be a small company.
Yeah.
Wow, you're brave, Stina. It's very good in your company. And you, Ralf, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, because you mentioned the need, and as I mentioned, I come from the pharmaceutical part of the business. I mean, Bayer, as a global corporation, we spend close to 4 billion euros in research and development. You can say the classical development and research that you have in the pharmaceutical business. But as also we have a high focus on innovations within also such elements as tech. So for us, it's important to attend the classic events like this. But I think for those who are interested in getting into connection with us, today the media is the internet and our website. And there we have a rather broad, perspective on that platform, where you can come up with your ideas. And if you talk about apps and elements as such, addressing healthcare, behavior change, compliance, all these matters, there we have a specific grants for apps website, G4A, very simple, if you put that on your computer. And there you will see a very clear, description on how you can apply your projects, be it small or big. And it doesn't have to be in our core business, but of course it sometimes has to relate to something that we are working within.
And just a small question, do you have any Danish startups already in your
Yes, I mean
grants for apps?
If we take grants for apps, it was launched in 2014, and by today globally we have around 140 companies that have collaborating with us. As I said before, I work Scandinavian, so in Scandinavia, I mean, we have some, and we have 3 good examples. I'll not mention names or whatever, or brands, but what I can say about these good examples is that these are apps based on technology which, send signals about how the body is working and functioning. For example, cardiac functions or other monitoring elements, because that is interesting for us, producing pharmaceuticals for cardiovascular diseases, oncology, hematology. So therefore it's important for us to find not only the best compounds to treat the disease, but also how is the compound being applied best possible, so it actually works as it should. It sounds very, wow, that's very easy, but it's actually complicated. But it's not enough to have the compound, but you also need people to understand how to use and take it.
Yeah. Okay, Lars.
Well, I think we meet each other throughout hospitals and throughout events like these through university incubators. So in corporate procurement, we also see our role as someone, connecting all the different stakeholders within the ecosystem. From corporate procurement, our clinical network is massive throughout the hospitals. It's massive throughout big corporates because we've been dealing with those guys for years. And now, recently, within the past few years, we've also been looking very much into the innovation ecosystem, startup, incubators and hubs, Health Tech Hub Copenhagen, Danish Tech Challenge, various incubators and accelerators, and also through the investment community as well.
Okay.
But I think it's interesting that, like we've seen this gradual sort of like evolution of like how we meet each other as well, because when I started in 2013, sort of like getting GE to get closer to startup companies, GE wasn't a very open company for startup companies, I'll tell you that. It's, if a startup company would call them up and say hey, we have this and that, they would reach the person who's picking up the phone at the reception. But that's as far as they went, frankly. Okay. So we're talking about 5 years ago, and that's really how it was. And at the same time, on the other hand, so the big companies have become more open, I think. But at the same time, I also allude the fact that the startup companies also have to be much more, active, and they have a role in sort of like, but not just that they're pushy, which is maybe the normal, but it takes a lot of patience to get to the hospital or get to work with big companies, so to understand the other side both ways. So the big companies have to understand how the startups work, what they need to do in order to invite them closer. But likewise, I think startups need to understand how the hospitals and healthcare organizations in general, or the big medtech companies, how they operate. So getting this sort of like slowly getting them closer to each other, I think has helped.
You can also say, sorry. I also used to work at Lundbeck, which is a big Danish pharmaceutical company, and I, from that perspective, now I'm just pre-assuming something on your behalf, but you also need the startups. You need those that creates the innovation, because that's also what we see now, is that you also more open towards us knocking on the door, because you have seen that you also need this, because at least when I was in Lundbeck, you don't do any innovation. We've existed for 2 years and we've done more innovation than I've ever seen in Lundbeck. So in that sense, I also think you need us in some way, with all my humbleness.
I totally agree with that. I think it's like, it's funny that GE is known as a company that is maybe one of the most innovative companies in the world. It has this reputation, right? But when you're inside and when you're looking at it, it's a big company that generally sort of buys its growth. So it buys at some point a startup company that has proven the technology and all that. If you look at the organic, it's close to zero, the growth. So it's innovative, but it's buying a lot of it. And so it does need to get closer to the startup companies, because it has to find good, acquisition targets.
So let me just follow. Let me just follow on that you mentioned with the need. Yes, we need you actually.
And we need you.
And then and then we ask, what do we actually need, or what are we looking for in like aspects like this? We look for things that address, you can say, real clinical needs which are benefit. We do not look for Me Too products or Me Too solutions. We want breakthrough, really groundbreaking, technologies or other matters. And you say, how that? Yes, because sometimes we even go outside, you can say, of our core business, and that's the way we can explore new areas and new ways, and be it this within this kind of fora, or in biotech, where it's more, you can say, on the compounds and the chemical elements, or the pharmacokinetics, or the genetic science. That's how we act, and that's what we're interested in.
I just want to ask Lars about one thing, but then how do we go from there till somebody actually will buy the stuff? Because we have a lot of pilots, we have a lot of solutions out there that have never ever been implemented and will never be implemented. How do we change this process in the ecosystem from the idea, the invention, the innovation, to the purchase and implementation?
So, basically our approach to it is to use public procurement as the enabler and as the driver of innovation and new technology. but using it very actively. So not public procurement as it used to be 5-10 years ago, and definitely some places still are like that. We call it sometimes a bit populistic, but sometimes we call it next generation public procurement, because we now try to use it to leverage new stuff. But sometimes we see that one of the biggest challenges is actually, sometimes I almost feel like a translator, because the language that the startup speaks, it's not always compatible with the big corporates or with the physicians and the clinics. And sometimes it needs, sometimes there needs to be someone who can bridge that gap. And that's what we try to do using procurement. But you're absolutely right about implementing new technology. And it's fairly easy to do just another pilot. I mean, we've had, countless pilots within new technology. But the thing is, how do we scale it? How do we put it from being just another pilot into the whole department, the whole hospital, the whole region, or perhaps even nationwide?
Oh yeah.
And that's why
Finland.
actually, and that's why we today actually at Danish regions just today launched, and we had the first meeting on Danish regions board of innovation. So, and I've been appointed to sit on that board, and the objective of that board is to scale new innovation nationwide. So if something works at one of my hospitals, why shouldn't it be scaled to the rest of the country and vice versa?
And I also feel that we have to take the responsibility to actually make something work, because if we get the attention and we get to collaborate, which we're very happy to and very excited about, because it's a huge opportunity for us. We also need to be the ones taking responsibility for it actually working, for it actually being ready to be implemented, for it actually showing that we bring value to the hospitals in this case. And I also think it's something that startups also have to think of. And then we need also the help, but we need each other as well to do these things. We're only 10 people, so we can't fix the whole hospital system in one go, but we really need that also guys like you, Lars, believe in what we do, because we can do better together, I think.
I think a key element is in any collaboration, and also these kind of collaborations, we have all the means, we have all the opportunities, and you can do endless matters. For us, in the role I sit and we sit in, it's important that there's a focus, that there's a clinical lead, and then that you align the expectations. What does that project bring to us? So you have some clear milestones or whatever. I mean, philanthropy is nice, but we need some kind of very focused and clear direction. Then you can get a good collaboration in these kind of settings. I mean, I think that's very important for us. And there we provide also, you can say, the consultancy, let's say business plans or whatever, if you win such a grant for apps, as it's mentioned, where you can win from 50 to 100,000 euros as a grant. You get support, you can say, from us as a company with office space or whatever, and work on your idea, keep even maybe your intellectual property if it's your own and you not go and merge with us. But there you get the right direction, you put up your business plan, and then you work on your project. I think that is important, also in these kind of projects.
One of the problems that we saw in the last couple of years was that if 5-6 years ago nobody, oftentimes I would say, rather than nobody in the hospitals wanted to actually get the startups in, because it was a distraction for them from their normal processes and all this stuff. It went to a point where everybody started loving the startups, and they were loving them to death. And so, because they all had this sort of idea of like, they all wanted to be part of the invention if there was a nice startup, and they all wanted to, we want to pilot you, but we also want to own part of your IP because you tested here. And all of a sudden the startups went into this endless sort of loop of pilots here and pilots there, and everybody wanted to own their IP and get the rights. And this also led to a lot of issues funding these companies, because the pilots were not really paying. They were paying maybe very little. And investors were very impatient, sort of like, well, I don't want you guys to pilot. Didn't you pilot there already? Why you need to pilot here? It's because we had this not invented here, If it was piloted in Helsinki, then Turku didn't want to buy it because they wanted to pilot it again, because who knows? It may not work here.
Yeah, so then maybe this innovation board idea, or the idea of scaling between regions and hospitals is we have to work on that, in my opinion, as well.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I heard about it a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's, it's a great initiative. It's, of course, from the medtech point of view that it's global. It's only one country, but that's a start already. That one country would actually scale within itself. I think it's great. So kudos for Denmark for doing that. Actually.
But how could we also, because I now they tell me there's 5 minutes left, I would like to discuss how could we expand the Nordic ecosystem? Because we have Nordic corporates, we have Nordic startups, so instead of only working in your own country, how can you as a chief of your village, how could you look at Denmark?
Yeah, I think, it's... I don't think we focus on Denmark. I don't think we focus on Nordics even, because I think a lot of these companies, they do solutions that can work not only even in Europe, but they can work in Middle East and Africa and so forth. So I think it's really sort of global. But of course, I think it's always natural when you start sort of expanding your business before you go to the other side of the world. It would be better to look at sort of like what are the countries that are fairly close by culturally and business-like and healthcare system-like and so on. And of course that ends up with looking at, like Nordic. So I think, again, maybe we have also in the Nordics this not invented here. So Denmark is very proud of, rightfully so, of its own ecosystem, and so is Finland and so is Sweden. So because of that, sometimes we sort of almost become this like, at least don't come here because we're all trying to go to Germany. But
yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, so since we only have a few minutes left, I would like each of you to give a comment on an advice regarding how to create trust between a corporate or procurement and then startups. What would be your advice in that situation? How do you create trust?
I think that's actually quite easy. I mean, first of all, I said again, align the expectations and deliver on what you promise, and then stay focused. I mean, believe in your idea and be persistent. I mean, never ever give up if you are a startup, whatever. I mean, that's, maybe very simple, but I think that's one of the key elements, because then the rest will fly. We have the means, but it has to fulfill these certain basic criteria before we can go all the way.
Okay.
Well, as a small company, we have a lot to do in order to create trust. We have to hire great people. We have to have a healthy investment case so we can actually attract investors and money. We have to build technology that actually works. We have to cooperate with those. I really think that what we need to do is every single collaboration that we do with small or big companies, everybody, we have to show this every time, and we have to continue showing those things, and we have to work hard, because there is a lot of eyes on us, because you have spent the last 50, 60 years building trust because you're a massive company. We have to do some of the same things. But basically we have to show that we're creating value to a healthcare system.
Yeah.
And yeah, the key word here is value, but sometimes it's also a matter of how we define value and how we, conceptualize value, and it's different. So I'm working with some of startups, trying to advise on the business plans, on the business models, and try to do that translation into what is it that a healthcare system actually is requesting. How do we define value? And if there's a collision between the startup's business model and what we define as value, then you need that translation. But trust is being built from successful projects, from being transparent around how you invest your money and how you make the business model. And to answer that question, the short one is yes, we are also investing into to mental health tech. We've got hopefully 3 projects coming online next year through a Grand Solutions application that we turned in 4 weeks ago.
Wow, great. And yep.
I say that trust is built between people over time. So time is of the essence. You can't meet someone here in the tech conference and you have built trust because you even exchange cards and you do lunch. It takes time. We can't get companies to work together unless the people in those companies want to work together. And if the companies or people inside those companies trust each other, and that takes time. And so invest in the relationships, especially with the hospitals and the big partners, the big corporates. You really have to work on that relationship over time. It does not happen instantly. Like it doesn't happen in any of our other human relationships. So I say like that the idea that GE would immediately invest in a company and would buy a company is like an idea of a Las Vegas marriage. Okay, but
And we don't want that.
first we want to go to the disco and offer drinks and have the first dance and movie and dinner. We have all these steps we got to go through.
Yeah.
And I think,
I agree.
and I think finally also, I mean, think about, if we talk pharma and healthcare, I think about, is there an actual, you can say, medical need, or is this really, does this really make sense? What does it fulfill? What gap does it close? What opportunity does it bring to bring better health or longer life or healthier life, better quality? I mean, it has to make sense in some way or the other. I mean, a me too, I mean, from Bayer's point, it's not our interest. It's groundbreaking science.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so we have to close down the panel now, but thank you very much for participating. I think
Thank
it
you.
was a great
Pleasure.
talk.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.